If you have a picture in your head of how the global economy works, it probably looks a bit like this. Container ships, ports, goods transported around the world. This is globalization. The heartbeat of commerce around us. The invisible force keeping us supplied with essentials and trinkets. So what happens when you try to turn this world upside down? This is the inside story of how the world economy really works and what's really happening at the front line of Donald Trump's trade war. A wet Sunday morning in October.
Good job, runners! There you are!
More than 26,000 runners are braving the elements to run the Detroit International Marathon. But this is a marathon with a difference, because a long stretch of its 26-mile route runs through another country altogether. The runners traverse North America's busiest international border crossing, the Ambassador Bridge, that connects Detroit with its Canadian neighbours just across the river. Windsor, Ontario, just on the other side of the Detroit River, is in some senses another part of this conurbation. But this year the marathon takes place in the shadow of a trade war that has begun to take its toll on the relationship between these two historic friends.
The marathon certainly speaks to the connection that we have with our friends over in Detroit. And it is a long-standing connection, it is a deep connection. This tariff war, there's animosity and animus between friends, but it's actually having an impact on families here, on businesses here, on our side of the border. So this is Windsor Assembly Plant, and this is our largest employer right here. And
How many people around about?
About 4,500.
Right, okay, that's a lot.
We're integrated economies. We are one region. And when it comes to things like the auto sector, the auto industry and the parts sector, it speaks to the tightness and the integration that we have created between Windsor and Detroit. Detroit being the Motor City in the United States and Windsor being Canada's auto capital.
If you want to understand how the economy really works and what the trade war actually means in practice, there is no better sector to zoom in on than the car industry. And here's the first thing you need to know. Car plants, like Windsor's Stellantis factory, where they make the Chrysler Pacifica, are actually just the tip of an industrial iceberg. The real work in making a car happens in other plants like this one, just outside Windsor. Modern passenger vehicles are assembled from thousands of tiny components. Here at Lanex, they make steel parts you'd only ever see if you look beneath the body of a car, as well as these strikers that secure the vehicle doors when you close them. Making door strikers is not a sexy business. You need to bend and extrude thick steel rods and press steel coil into just the right shape before welding it all together. But, and this is the key part, each of these little components is made not just in Canada, but also in America.
I mean, everything is intertwined. We don't just have Canadian suppliers on one program right from start to finish. So you would buy your material from the US side. You would process it on the Canadian side.
Consider the journey one of these striker plates takes in its production. The steel comes from Wixon, just northwest of Detroit. It crosses the border to the Lanex plant in Canada. Then it's sent to Brampton, Ontario for heat treating, before travelling back across the border to Warren, in the suburbs of Detroit, for plating. Then the part goes back over the border to Canada again, where it's packaged and sent to Lanex's customer, who then sends it back over the border to assembly plants on the US side. This little component has crossed the border 4 times, but it's one tiny example of how much trade is embedded in the goods we use.
Every time it crosses, you run into another situation where, like, is there a tariff on this? Do we have to get this? Did this get cleared properly? So it's just, again, it's just a lot of extra costs and work.
Once upon a time, none of this mattered all that much. After all, trade into and around North America were about as free as could be. There was a 2.5% tariff on cars coming in here, and thanks to the US-Mexico-Canada agreement, the USMCA, anything crossing the border here was completely tariff-free.
There's a border, but it was, we had free trade. So everything was set up the most efficient way possible. we freely, Mexico, Canada, US, yeah. It was just one region, essentially.
And so when a part was trucked or shipped from one supplier in Canada across to Motor City, it was basically friction-free.
The average part that is put into a vehicle before it rolls off the finish line, whether it's made in Detroit or in Windsor, has crossed the border 6 to 8 times for continuous improvement. So it really is hard to say that a vehicle is made in the United States or Canada because the parts that make up that vehicle are made by the hands of men and women in both countries all through the process.
Windsor is still the automotive capital of Canada. But this isn't just about economics, it's about something deeper. A history shared with its neighbours in Detroit. This is the birthplace of the modern automotive industry. Every corner you turn brings a fresh reminder. The man who invented mass production. The plant that first turned out Henry Ford's Model T.
So this was built late 70s, early 80s, and it became very much a symbol of Detroit, the Renaissance Center. And that's where General Motors headquarters is today, but they're moving right up the street.
Okay.
You can see the General Motors on the front, and you'll be able to see their vehicles on display.
Glenn Stevens lives and breathes Detroit. He's the chief representative for the industry here, and he's taking me on a tour of Motor City.
That is the original General Motors headquarters. That's Windsor right there. Yep. That is the Golden Dome. Now you start to get into the Detroit suburbs. This is Woodward.
Woodward.
So now we're on Jefferson. We want to be careful here not to get in the right lane because we will be in Canada before we know it. It did happen to me once.
You accidentally went to Canada.
It was the day of the Detroit Marathon. It was literally this about 6 years ago. But I got in this right lane, and I got forced into the tunnel lane. And I'm like, well, and the Lions game was going on. So I'm like, I'll just sit over in Windsor and watch the Lions game.
But this place notoriously fell on hard times. The bankruptcy of Chrysler and GM during the financial crisis, followed by the bankruptcy of the city itself.
It's a little spooky, the idea that
There
were rows and rows and rows of houses, and
this
now...
was all neighborhood, and now it's not. And that's a challenge.
This building, more than any other, Michigan Central Station, became a symbol of Detroit's plight.
And when you kind of like snuck inside, like what was it anything?
I allegedly snuck inside.
Yeah, allegedly. When people snuck inside,
Right.
What would they have seen inside?
Complete ruins. I mean, everything flooded. I mean, they had to pump out millions and millions and millions of gallons of water.
Like for Detroit, it's been this economic roller coaster, hasn't it, for kind of a long time?
Yes, I mean, we've been an up and down industry for, I mean, this is a 120-year-old industry.
And it properly started here, really.
It properly started here, you know. This is where Detroit was the birthplace of the modern automotive industry, the assembly line, you know, Henry Ford, and we put the world on wheels.
Now, Detroit is hoping for much the same thing Donald Trump is, a rejuvenation of domestic industry. But with tariffs in place, it is already a bumpy ride.
On January 20th, when the America First Trade Policy Act was put into place, we were expecting a lot of change from this new second Trump administration. We were anticipating that, but the velocity and magnitude has been quite something.
Out in the Detroit suburbs is another of those companies making the crucial parts inside cars and trucks. Control arms, knuckles, axle brackets and hinges, vital parts of a car's suspension system. Lucerne International sells them all.
So some of them are domestic and some of them are still left.
But crucially, it makes them not here in America, but much, much further afield.
Back in the early 2000s, a lot of components, started to go offshore because everybody was looking for that low-cost country solution, especially automotive. Everything that you're looking at has made its trip over here from China, from our manufacturing partners there.
And so theoretically, what would the tariffs that were due on that be?
Not even theoretically, I can tell you. There's 72.5% tariffs on all of these parts.
72.5%?
72.5%.
That's wild.
Yeah. Everything you see has come over from China.
At this point, it's perhaps worth pausing to list some of them. There's the Liberation Day tariff specifically on China. There's Section 232 duties on cars, another 25%. There's specific steel and aluminium tariffs on top of those, all designed to try to reshore manufacturing.
And obviously right now, there's a lot of people saying we need to bring this stuff back. So bring manufacturing back to the United States, bring the, all of it, the raw materials, the whole thing. Is that doable?
It's a piece of cake. Absolutely. No, it's a difficult process. It took us years to get into other countries and build out supply chains. It will take us years to bring this kind of manufacturing back. We still have a bare footprint of manufacturing in this country, but when it comes down to like really the industrialization and bringing that back into all the way from raw material production to the kind of components that we produce, there's no footprint left.
No manufacturing left. It's worth pressing pause and reflecting on that for a moment. To understand how it's come to this, what you really need to do is trace the journey these suspension joints and metal parts took to get here in the first place. You need to begin at the very beginning, somewhere else entirely. Long before the iron in those steel parts was forged in mills in China, it mostly came out of the ground here in the Pilbara in northwest Australia. An autonomous train, more than a mile long, with not a human being on board, traverses the outback, carrying tens of thousands of tons of iron ore, most of which is destined for China.
Dampier Ports is 2 terminals,
Right.
Parker Point, which is this wharf and this operation, and then East Intercourse Island, which is out over the other side, which I'll point out, and if we want to, we can go for a drive over there.
Okay.
Parker Point does about 110 million tonnes a year, and then East Intercourse Island's about 45.
No other country makes as much of the world's steel these days than China, and most of that steel is made with Australian iron. The Pilbara region is the biggest source of rich iron ore anywhere. So while few have heard of Dampier and neighbouring Port Hedland, they are among the busiest and biggest ports in the world, sending billions of tons of iron ore north to China.
So all to China.
This is ground zero of globalisation, the ore that becomes the steel from which the world makes nearly everything these days.
So this ship is being loaded right now. You can see all of the iron ore is going on. It's about 175,000 tonnes of the stuff. Once this is done, it takes about 24 hours. And this isn't the only one. There's another 2 of them that are being loaded right now. It's a constant stream. You get a sense of that, just how permanent this is. And all of these, after they're loaded, they're straight off to China.
But these flows of material across to Asia are also the roots of the trade war, because some contend that China has become too dominant in global manufacturing. And Donald Trump contends that tariffs are the answer to usher in a manufacturing renaissance in the US.
Perhaps the extent of globalization has just been excessive, and we need to localize and deglobalize. And then we have this whole geopolitical thing where maybe it wasn't the smartest thing in the world to put a ton of manufacturing in China.
And so the White House has imposed tariffs on China and a host of other countries. But those tariffs haven't destroyed China's economy or stopped Chinese exports. They've mostly just sent them somewhere else instead.
Since the US tariff on China is higher than it is on most other countries, there is an incentive to transship, meaning to arbitrage, basically export to the United States via third countries, and so benefit from lower tariffs on those countries. You know, we live in a time where we have just-in-time production, warehouse capacity is actually pretty limited, factories are basically running 24/7, so you're constantly getting the stuff that's getting churned out and you have to move product.
Nowhere do you see that more vividly than in a place like Antwerp, the beating heart of international trade. If something is coming into Europe, it most probably comes into here or nearby Rotterdam. And when it comes to cars, nowhere else in the world can quite compete. Zeebrugge, part of Antwerp's port, is Europe's biggest export hub for automobiles. cars, many of them built with Chinese steel forged from Australian iron, leave here for destinations around the continent and across the Atlantic to the United States. But when I visit the car terminal at the height of tariff uncertainty in midsummer, that constant flow of exports is stuttering. The trade war is beginning to take its toll.
If you have bought a new car in the UK and it's been imported, which most of them are, there's a really good chance it's come through here, Zeebrugge, and you can see car upon car, these are all new cars, most of these ones are Toyotas, and actually that ship right now is being loaded with Toyotas. It's going to the UK. That little blue van is the one that's taking the drivers who have loaded the cars off the ship so they can put more of them on. It's a constant process. Thousands, tens of thousands of these cars here waiting to get on there, and actually this port is more full of cars waiting to go around the world than ever before because they are struggling so much because of what's happening with global trade.
The scenes you see here are yet another byproduct of American tariffs. There's the 25% levy on all car imports and 100% on Chinese electric vehicles, a tariff actually introduced by Joe Biden. The upshot is the port has become a sort of makeshift parking lot as vehicles sit here waiting for the tariffs to come down or to go somewhere else entirely.
To be fully efficient and fully operational, we need at least 20% capacity free to unload and load and do our normal activities, sales potential and so on to explore. But we are often to more than 90%.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It has an impact on our efficiency. To talk in extremes, for instance, if you are 100% full, you can no longer unload or load a ship. And if you are at 90%, you have to do a lot of reshuffling because you create a fragment place. So it's a continuous cost, in fact.
Right now, more or less, what capacity are you at?
At this moment, we are around 90%.
Really? So you're over your capacity?
Yeah.
Squint a little bit, and you can start to sense a shift, maybe a permanent shift, in the way the world works.
Where is the time that you could go? I'm going to buy a new car, and let's say you could pick up your car 2 weeks later and that was done. Today you have to order your car almost 6 months up front. If you want that specific car, then you have to take into account a long delivery time.
And this is partly why. It's because the just-in-time model isn't working.
The just-in-time model is almost impossible to implement today.
For decades, the world economy was configured in this way. Just-in-time supply chains. Items delivered minutes ahead of when they're needed. This was part of the answer for how stuff just kept getting cheaper. But what you're looking at here might just be the beginning of the end of that old world. Back to Detroit and to Lucerne, the company importing all those Chinese parts made of Australian iron for American cars. And look, another vivid image of trade disruption. Boxes of goods stacked up, waiting to be processed. Why? Because the tariffs on these imports are so high that, well, it actually makes more sense to pile them up, to leave them in a kind of limbo.
This stuff is almost not officially in the US.
This is you're not standing in the US right now, right? We're part of you're in a foreign trade zone.
A foreign trade zone. What that means in practice is that this warehouse has become a sort of grey area, a staging post where imports can sit until someone has worked out where they're heading and what tariffs they owe.
So now becoming a foreign trade zone, those goods travel into our facility and they never officially enter US commerce.
But even a foreign trade zone can't stop the inevitable. At some point, when they leave the warehouse, the tariffs will have to be paid. And at some point, the cost of those tariffs will be passed on.
American companies are the ones taking the brunt of these tariffs, which is trickling down to the American consumer. And people don't understand that.
So it's draining money from you as well.
Absolutely. Oh gosh, yes. I mean, it's pulling money right out of American companies.
2 hours outside of Detroit, there is another part of that hidden constellation of car companies. Team One Plastics makes plastic parts, tens of millions of them a year, that go into car bodies, dashboards and engines.
Am I going to quiz you on all of these pieces? Is that unfair?
Yeah, if you quiz me on all of them, I'm not going to know them all, man.
If the Trump administration's tariffs bring back more manufacturing to America, that would be no bad thing, says Gary Grogowski.
I think the goal of what he's trying to do is worthy from a standpoint of national defense and not allowing it. It's always felt like they allowed too much of our manufacturing base. You know, we don't want to turn into England. Right?
Thanks.
Sorry.
Yeah. But for the time being, they are also raising his costs. The machines here come from Japan. The very newest one incurred tens of thousands of dollars in extra charges. And the big problem isn't just the cost of tariffs, it's that it's not altogether clear what tariffs people should actually be paying. Consider what happened when Gary needed to order some new dies, the steel molds in which their plastic is shaped, which, by the way, aren't really made in America anymore.
We had one die maker who interpreted it as it's going to be a 25% tariff on what he's charging us to build that die.
Okay.
We had another interpret it that as long as he was buying steel that was smelted and poured in the United States and brought into Canada, then it became a derivative product.
So it's
and
not
so
got a
it could
tariff.
be, well, it could fall under a different set of tariffs that would not be quite as onerous, but he's unsure.
So no one really knows for sure.
You know, I mean, sometimes they change so quickly that you don't really have time to, you know, the rules aren't laid out very strictly.
Is it any surprise that, in the absence of any clarity on trade rules, so many of the flows of goods have slowed or dried up? This is not just about money. It's about boxes piled up in warehouses, cars stacked up in car parks, about businesses that still can't work out what tariff they're supposed to be paying. Above all else, it's about the way the world works.
You could hardly get a better illustration of globalization, the nature of the global economy. That's Canada, that's America. There's a river between them, but in economic terms, they are completely intertwined. How on earth do you unpick that? The short answer is, no one has ever really tried, but we are, right now, in the process of finding out.
As for where this leaves us, well, that's a question we may not know the answer to for years. But something is changing in the foundations of the global economy. One chapter is ending. Another is being written.